Well, there's no mic. Are we ready?
Yeah. We're always ready.
Well,
All right, Jerry Gills, all the way from Helsinki. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Chris, for asking me to get back into this circle and to have these discussions that I miss so much, and also so many friends miss so much. I'll start by saying that I took up the title you gave me to talk about peripheries, and then I thought, what can I say that's new or different? So I think it was the poet Horace who had this rule that if he wrote something, then he would put it away in his drawer for 7 years, and then he would take it out and look at it. So if it still looked decent, then he might actually think about publishing it. Well, I took that to a new level, and I actually wrote a very large manuscript in about 1994 on ideas of world historical system patterns, and then it's still sitting in the drawer. I've never used it. So I thought about some of the ideas that I'd written down then, so some of the things I'll say are from that. So a few punchlines. I just tried to come up with some different ways of thinking about how we could look at peripheralization and the meaning of our project. I mean, so I came up with the idea that following Marx, the inspiration again is that we must not forget that ultimately the project has been about the issue of human emancipation from forces of domination and oppression, whether they come through the economic, social relations, or through the social relations that the state represents, actually both. And that all social systems and social orders could be studied by the way in which surplus from human labor is produced, is extracted, transferred, consumed, redistributed, and invested. And I believe that is a useful template indeed. So what I was trying to say here to this, I'll keep it short, is that to praise everything that's been done in the last 25 or 30 years, in the sense of so much progress has been made from the starting points of some of the objects of our critique. So much has been accomplished in mapping the production of commodities, the exchange of commodities, the transfers of surplus, the centers, the peripheries, the convergences, the divergences, the expansions, the contractions. All of that is necessary, very important work. But and also today I keep hearing the territoriality seems to be still like an object in itself. And my message is that to return back to the human-centeredness of the importance of understanding the social relations underneath the entire structure, and always emphasizing them in the analysis and where they lead us. To come back to the project, in the sense is that all of this leads to the present and the world civilization that we have now, and the forms of oppression and domination and crisis that we have now, and about the future of the human species as a whole, where we have come in global history at this present time, and then where we may go in terms of transformative processes in the future that would lead to greater human emancipation. So it's kind of like a reminder. So that you saw some of the language in the abstract, so you can look at that again about so I'm looking at really putting the social relations, the extraction of surplus at the center again, and the hierarchical structure of the accumulation of surplus at the center again of the kind of analysis that we do. So it's not like a mapping of peripheries as a territorial entity, that's the object of the exercise itself, however necessary and useful, important that is and has been and would still be. But that means peripheralized social relations mean more than just a territory on a map that you chart. They are primarily about understanding gradations of the exploitation of human labor and how those fit into hierarchical chains of the accumulation of surplus of social wealth and of power. So in a way, it's kind of like that I would like us to, and I know that the data for that is extremely difficult to come at. So I don't deny that at all. And the data for material objects is much, and even there where there are gaps, but it's much easier to get at. And archaeology is, again, difficult to decipher when you're trying to look at the forms of human labor and the social relations of extraction. But one of the things I'm interested in is the way in which oikos forms, which are more solidaristic types, non-commodified, not in the capital form, have been historically converted or transformed into the capital form. And I looked at the sort of basic set of the types of social surplus, the way the extraction
social relations extraction by tax, rent, gift, tithe, wage, and profit. But that, in a sense, looking at the idea that this is not the articulation of modes of production, this is not the transitions between modes of production as discrete historical eras in the old Marxist framework. Most of us left that behind a very long time ago. But it is about, in a sense, perhaps trying to study a global historical process by which a confluence of all those forms of surplus find themselves subsumed under the control of the dominance of the form capital in world history. And then we find the apex of that in the world historical system we have today. And as Patrick said, in that sense also, why didn't we talk about slavery a lot more today? Because slavery being, in history, the most extreme form of the extraction of social surplus. And peripheralization often, and especially in the last few centuries, has had a very tight relationship in some of the cases with the form slavery. Right? And so that's another reminder about the importance of putting the social relations back at the center rather than the principle of territorial mapping of a center-periphery structure. So that's what I meant by saying let's look more at peripheralized social relations of the extraction and accumulation of surplus wealth, capital, and social power. And there are other things I could say about more attention to the symbolic element and psychological element, psychoanalytical analysis of what I call the accumulation complex, how it's related to the social construction of the value complex, how that creates a world system hierarchy of value complexes, and then we reach a complex we have today. And we're sort of getting underneath what's actually going on with all those prestige goods, because we tend to look at them like objects, or, and we're mapping their flows, but actually what they reveal is a whole a psychology of the human being, and we can try to study that, get inside that to understand what's happening in a very different way. Because in a way we still sort of mystify it if we just look at the objects and realizing, like Marx said a very long time ago, capital isn't a thing; it's a social relation. And so I am also very interested in the interplay historically between mythos and logos, in the exchange system, in the state, in capital. That not one displacing the other, but but both of them constantly existing in a very kind of interesting interplay, and which are tied to social ontologies and a contest between social ontologies, between oikos social ontology and capital social ontology in history. And we find that people are talking about that a lot today. If you talk about post-development theorists, a whole number of them, and other people who are looking to alternatives to capital in the present time, in some ways like a historical necessity, although that you can't say it's a dominant trend in human culture to move to alternatives to capital. But that's still part of the radical impetus in real politics today, is searching for those ways out of what's perceived to be a terminal global crisis of the present form of world civilization, dominated overall by capital. Should I stop there and say thanks very much?
Thank you.